Good morning and happy Fun-Tastic Friday. We're having fun getting our garden together, right? So far, we've set up our soil, we started our planting our seeds inside, and now we're watching our seeds grow. That can be a lot of fun. Now we're going to plant our starts, and the ones we started inside, and whether you started them inside or you purchased them, it really doesn't matter. Because I want to share with you some really interesting things that you need to do to keep them going, okay? So you started them inside and they were temperature controlled. They were temperature controlled inside the nursery as well. That means that they didn't have any wind blowing on them and the temperature was set at normally a range. It didn't get that 40-degree difference between the day and the night. So before you actually put them in the garden, you have to do a process, if you haven't heard of it, what's called hardening off. Okay? Hardening off is really just gradually introducing your baby's plants into the garden. So once they're big enough and they're within a week or so of going out into the ground, what you'll need to do is you can get yourself a box. It's easier to transport them that way. Set them all in a box, just in their containers, and take the box outside. First, you'll start them in a shady spot, and you will only leave them out there for an hour. The box isn't actually necessary. It saves having to go back and forth over and over again. Just gets them moved there faster. So you'll take them outside, put them in a nice shaded area that doesn't have a lot of wind or other things that can disturb them, no animals or anything like that, okay? Leave them there for only about an hour. Just an hour outside, not in direct sunlight, or like I said, or where the wind can get them, so that they can just adapt to getting the fresh air. Then you'll bring them back in. And then the next day, you'll take them out and they'll be out there for 2 hours. And this time in the same area where they can't be in, there's no wind on them or sun directly on them, leave them out there just for a couple of hours. And then you'll continue to do this. And on the fourth day, what you want to do is you want to actually water them after you've moved them outside. Okay? So let them get used to the water from outside instead of your tap water in the house. Let them have that. And you'll leave them out for 4 hours that day. On the fifth day, you can start putting them in the sun for an hour and then back where they were sheltered for an hour for the rest of the 5 hours. This is the hardening off process. It takes a little while, and this is why I said in the first episode that what we wanted to do was kind of guess where in advance, give them a little extra time to grow inside, because we knew we were going to take this 7 to 10 days to harden them off. So you're going to watch them. You're just going to be careful, see which ones seem to be going well, which one seems to be wilting and not getting enough water when they're out there. So on the sixth day, they can stay a couple hours in the sun and then the other 4 hours in the shade. And the seventh day, it can be 3 hours in the sun and then the other 4 hours in the shade. By then you'll be about equal. Okay, so you can put about half as much time in the sun and half as much time in the shade. I'd go 8 hours for just a couple days. And I only say that just because you really want to pay attention to these. They've been sheltered, like we said, and you just want to make sure that they're good and ready for the ground, okay? Now, you remember we talked about in the last episode those seed packets, right? So this is going to tell you where you're going to plant them, along with the plan that you came up with. Do they need sun? Do they need shade? Are they hardy in both? Your seed packet helped you build your plan. Your plan is going to help you where you're going to plant these when you get them out there to the garden, okay? And each plant is different. It has different needs, different watering needs, different shade or sunlight needs, and all the things that you harvest may harvest at different times. And that's where the fun of planning all of this is, and looking at those seed packets and seeing when what is coming up. We even got really good at putting our onions in the ground, and then back planting behind them, we planted corn in the same field. Just before we knew the onions were going to come out, the corn went in, and then we knew we'd still be able to use the same bed for this field of corn. It was actually kind of fun to figure this out as we went along. So are you ready to plant? You'll get your map. You'll get out your spade in your hand and you'll start planting. But what I want you to remember is that when you dig your hole, what you're going to do is you're going to dig it about as deep as the root ball. And the root ball, if you don't know what that is the part where all the roots are. It's just below the surface where the dirt is, okay? If your root ball is 2 inches deep, your hole doesn't need to be 4. It needs to be 2. Now, it does need to be bigger around. Okay, we need the soil loosened up, and that's why we have nice loose soil, right? So you'll loosen the soil 2 or 3 times bigger around, but the same depth of the root ball. When you get ready to plant your plants, you'll bring your tray out and you'll set them next to them. I usually plant more towards the evening, only because I want them out there through the night and the sun to come up the next day. I don't want to give them a shock of them being planted in the morning with the heat of the day coming, okay? So when you push your plant out to plant it, you're going to inspect the root ball. Now that's where all the roots have been growing, and sometimes there should be a lightish color. Sometimes though they're dark. If they're dark, something's gone wrong, maybe something bad with the soil or something. It doesn't mean the plant is not going to make it. It may mean it needs extra care. If that root ball is dark, what I would do is I would get a slightly bigger container to replant in, and I would keep it in the house a little bit longer, okay? Just because you want to make sure it has the right length of time for healthy roots, because healthy roots, healthy soil, healthy plant, healthy vegetables, okay? If they're lighter in color, they're good to go. If the root ball has been encircled too many times around, what I usually do is gently try to break some of those free before I plant them in the ground. Some people say that's not it needs to be transplanted again back inside. But I've had success with just kind of breaking that root ball up a little bit and loosening them from going circling and circling around. It's just like transplanting your house plants. If they get too root bound, they don't have a tendency to grow and thrive. And what we're looking for is a growing, thriving plant, because that's what is going to give us growing, thriving vegetables, right? So we look at the plant to make sure it's healthy. And if we have to put it back inside the house for another week or so to let the roots get a chance to become healthy or to be nourished a little bit longer, that's perfectly fine. It happens. And you remember when we talked about germination rates, not everything germinates, not everything grows properly either. And sometimes if you seed straight into the ground, we do this what's called overseeding, okay? So you'll put in a row of carrots, and if it's not in a tape, you'll just drop a bunch of carrot seeds down inside there. And they want you to overseed because not every seed is going to germinate. And then when you cover it up and you let them start to grow, when you go back to thin it out, that means to pluck the ones that are not growing as well, what you're doing is giving the other ones a chance to thrive. So you do that when you're directly seeding. But when you're planting them in the house, think about that fact that if it doesn't thrive and it's not good, then that's okay. You can use it as compost and it can still become part of the garden. When you plant the plant, you don't want it to go below the soil mark on where the plant is already used to. And when I do this, I usually take off a couple of the bottom leaves to encourage the plant to grow up. Anytime you pinch off something, you're encouraging the plant to do the opposite of where you pinch. If you pinch the top of the plant, that would stop it from growing taller. It would spread out. If you pinch a couple leaves on the bottom, very bottom of the stem, you're encouraging it to keep going up and not to grow out at that point, okay? So make sure the plant is standing upright when it goes in the hole. I know it sounds funny, but plants have been planted at my house that weren't quite straight, and tomato plants tipped over the weight of the tomato can actually topple the plant, okay? So cover them, gently pat it down. Don't force it. Don't make it solid. Don't push it really hard or stomp on it with your foot, because you want it to be slightly packed, not heavily packed. You want those roots to have a chance to start spreading out and finding their way around, okay? At our house, we always give the freshly planted plants, either if they're house plants, a shot of B1. You can get this at the gardener store. Probably any of the big box stores has it too. It might be pre-mixed, or you may have to mix it yourself, so be sure to read the label whether or not you have to mix it yourself, because you don't want to put it too strong in there. We take ours, we mix it into a jug of water, an old milk jug or something, and then we just pour some of that on each plant. It just helps with the shock of being transplanted and being up. Basically, we're uprooting them. It'd be like uprooting a tree and moving it 10 feet and then sinking it back in the ground, right? Another one is to remember when you water to stay off the leaves. Plants don't necessarily want their leaves drowned. And when you put too much water on the leaves, especially if you water in the morning, you could cause sunburn on the leaves. This is why drip irrigation systems work so well, is because the water goes straight down to the ground. And even some people put in those cones that go down into the ground and have holes in them, so the water just fills that cone and the water is seeping more at the root level. Those are very helpful. If you've got money to invest in things like that, that works. But drip irrigation works well too, where the hole is spaced where the plants are. You just turn it on for so long it goes straight down there and it stays off the leaves. It's less of a chance of damaging it. You don't want to sunburn them, and you don't want to waste water. So the lower to the ground the water is, the better off the chance that the plant actually gets more water. Then, like I said over and over again, I cage them. I put a small cage over them just to be sure. One, I put a marker in, because sometimes plants look alike. I'm telling you, that's why when you go to a plant store and you're looking at them, they put the marker in there because they want you to know what you're buying. Some of those leaves look just alike, and you're not really sure when you buy them, is this cornstalk? Is this asparagus? Is this tomato? So I put a little marker saying what it is, and I put a cage over it to make sure that the bunnies don't come in here and eat my fresh greens, right? Consistent watering is the key to a healthy garden. Be sure to make sure that you're watering enough for it to be somewhat moist, but the water isn't pooling or soggy, okay? That's drowning it, and the roots won't live through it. Well, that's what we have for today. If you have any questions, you can always email at becky@synergyforpeace.org. Happy gardening.